Today we are talking about how to play like you mean it. Welcome to Burnout Solutions. My name is Mona Tippett. I am a registered nurse, a life coach, an emotional resiliency expert, and a mom. I love to help healthcare workers and caretakers and just busy, capable people understand their brain and nervous system so stress, overwhelm, and frustration do not run their life. Here on this podcast, we break down burnout, emotional overload, and survival patterns in simple human language. I love to give you practical ways to feel safer, calmer, and more present in your everyday life. You do not need fixing. What you need is support and a nervous system that knows that it's safe. Thanks for being here. Hello, and welcome back to Burnout Solutions. I'm so glad that you're here today. This is episode 6. This is episode 6 in my work and play series. And I hope you've been learning a lot. It has been really fun for me to talk about. I've had conversations with people who have listened, and I've been getting good feedback. So thank you for that. Today, I went on a hike because I am purposefully incorporating nature and contemplation with my exercise. And I went with my daughters because school is out, and we just had a great time. And actually, we listened to some of the book that I'm going to talk about today. And it was just a really, really great morning so far. So I hope your summer is off to a great start as well. So we have been talking about rest and working and lies that we believe about working and rest. We've learned about play deprivation and what it does to the brain. We've talked about how to make your leisure work for you and not against you. Last week, we talked about the vacation trap, and I gave you 7/8 ways to find joy in your work. And also talked about happiness deficits that keep high achievers from running on empty. If you didn't listen to any of those, please go back and listen. I think you will find them valuable. But today we are moving on, and we are specifically talking about play. And actually, a lot of this idea came from this book that I read called Play It Away, A Workaholic's Cure for Anxiety. And it was written by Charlie Hoehn. And I've talked about it a little bit in earlier episodes, but today I wanted to go a little bit deeper in what I learned from him. And if you want to listen to this book, it's a pretty easy book. It's an audiobook, read it, whatever. He is not a researcher. He's not a clinician, but who Charlie is a person who burned himself out. He works really hard. He worked with other high achievers. He worked with Tim Ferriss, and they created a business. They did app things, they did training, and, he made a lot of money and he worked hard. He talks about how he would go 4 days with sleeping only 4 to 6 hours. He talks about a lot of things that he did and what he suffered from it and what he tried to do to cure his burnout, his anxiety. And what he did was he started playing, and that changed everything. And his story might ring true to your story. So let's just go in a little bit. Charlie describes the beginning of his anxiety with physical specificity that's almost clinical. He had shallow breathing. He had tension in his gut. He had chest pain. He had a rapid heartbeat that never quite settled. He had a terrible sense that something awful was about to happen to him, even when everything was actually fine. He had an inability to relax, even when he was done with his work, even when he was supposed to be resting, and even when there was nothing that really needed to be done. He talked about how he could not rest. He could not sit still. He felt like he needed to push himself. He needed to be productive. He needed to make money. And it's just an interesting story that I think a lot of us can relate to in some degree. So Charlie's anxiety developed in the context of intense, relentless overwork in a high achieving environment. He was doing everything right by external measures. He talks about how he is working with all these other people who are doing just like he is. They're looking into a screen for 12 to 16 hours a day. They're never sleeping. They're caffeinating themselves and drinking on the weekends. He just is in this environment with a lot of people just like him. And on the inside, he doesn't say this, but his nervous system was a wreck. And he just talks about his symptoms, how he was always activated. He was always scanning. He was always just felt awful. He was never able to relax. And so what he did once he noticed it, he's like, I got to try something different. And he did try a lot of things. He did meditation and yoga and therapy and journaling and exercise and changed how he ate and supplements. And he said he even fasted and prayed, volunteered. He did all of these things. He even went on medication. And his honest assessment was that some of those things helped, but only marginally, and none of them resolved the core problem. And according to him, it was because a core problem was not a lack of wellness practices, although he didn't really have any until he started implementing them. But he said that the core problem for him was the complete evacuation of play from his life. He said he never played. And he said no wellness practice can substitute for what play can provide. And that insight changed things for him. And when he stopped trying to find a cure and just started asking simpler questions like, what did I love doing before work became everything to me? What made time disappear? What did I do when I was a kid? And what did I do where I forgot to be anxious? And from that question, play came back. It was a little cautious at first, but then he increased more. He increased his devotion to play. And he said his anxiety began for the first time to actually resolve. And his core argument is one that resonates really deeply with lots of things that I've covered in this series. But he said that anxiety in high achievers is often not a brain chemistry disorder or personal failing. And I totally agree with that. I believe a lot of people in our society right now have anxiety that is not a brain chemistry disorder. Not all, but a lot. But it could be that we are pushing ourselves. We are white knuckling it. We are addicted to productivity and success. And when we create that life, play doesn't really have a place, and it often has been completely removed. And for him, he says the treatment was a restoration of what had been taken away when he was a kid. Now, this does make sense because from polyvagal theory, Charlie was describing a nervous system that had lost access to the ventral vagal state, right? Our zone of optimal performance where we feel connected and safe. And he was stuck in overdrive of sympathetic activation, and he did not know how to stop that. And play, which was intrinsically motivated, it was absorbing, it was a joyful activity, it provided meaning, it provided satisfaction and enjoyment. And when we incorporate all of that, then yes, play can be one of the most reliable pathways back to our ventral vagal zone. Because remember, our nervous system doesn't learn its way back. It experiences things in our body that can get us back to our zone of optimal performance. And play and movement is often how the body can get there. So let's move on. In the book, he talks about anchors, which Deb Dana talks about anchors. They both are anchoring in a specific zone, but Charlie talks about anchors as things that are chronic, often invisible stressors that keep your nervous system in a state of fight or flight, even if it's in a low humming grade of fight or flight. And they can be the background hum of worry or anxiety that prevents genuine recovery, even when you're not actively working, even when you're at home, even when you're, in the shower, things that just stay on your mind. Deb Dana talks about anchors as things that keep you grounded positively in your nervous system. So either way, these are anchors that are holding us in one spot, just like an anchor. So for him, these stress anchors were usually not dramatic, and they aren't often dramatic. They are often not a big crisis. They can be, but more often than not, they are small, persistent, accumulated things that slowly drain us as the day goes on, as the week goes on, and often we wake up feeling exhausted because of these anchors. So what are some examples? Well, they could be unresolved tension with a colleague that you've never addressed. It could be irritating about your commute, your email inbox, or issues that you're dealing with at work that look like an emergency, but really aren't. He talks about student loans and financial worries that people carry, social obligations that we dread but are never addressed, even certain things like documentation that can fill you with misery, you know, anything like that. Relationships, sickness, those kind of things. And so in this book, Charlie shares a method of how you can identify those stressful anchors. And it's really simple. It's very similar to what I talked about and how you identify stress versus anxiety. And this is what you do. You write everything down that you're worrying about on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. And you just write everything. You're not filtering, you're not judging, you're not saying that this is silly, that this is worrying me. You just write it all out and get it out of your head and onto paper. I have even a whole entire podcast episode about this that I did with another life coach and how this really does benefit the brain. And once we have them written down, you go through the list and ask honestly, can any of these things be removed? Can any of these things be reduced? What of these things could be delegated away, resolved, addressed, even partially? Because what happens in your brain when you do this really is significant. You shift from, why is this happening to me? Or a victim, passive, helpless state of the nervous system to turning on your prefrontal cortex and moving back into, even partially into your optimal zone of performance. And your brain turns on the thinking of, what can I actually do about this? It gives you active agency. It helps your brain problem solve, and it is intentional. And just that neurological shift reduces anxiety before anything is resolved. So write it down. For healthcare workers, maybe some of those anchors are structural or systemic, like things you can't control, like staffing shortages, like managers that you don't get along with, or electronic charting, the impossible patient loads. Teachers have very similar testing scores that you want your students to get, administration demands, parent demands that you want to meet, right? Parents even have these. We want our kids to do well in their activities, and we worry about them and their social circles. And there's just a lot of things as adulting can be really difficult. And for sure, you cannot eliminate these stressful anchors all at once. But I want you to be honest about what you actually have some control over, and maybe more than you thought you did. So when we name them and when we try to reduce even one or two, it can create breathing room and space. And play can grow into some of that space. Now, I want to shift into something that I've also talked about a little bit more. So now that you know that you need to play, or you should play, how do you do it? Because adults can play differently than children, but not often. And Charlie talks about that in his book a lot, that he would play catch with his friends. He joined an improv comedy group. He stopped watching the news. He did a lot of things that helped him start to play. And Stuart Brown, who I've mentioned before in the series, is a researcher on play. I talked about it in episode 2. He has a concept that I think is really helpful for making play actually work in your life. And he talks about different play personalities. So we're going to go into a little bit deeper here on which play personality you have and how to incorporate play a little bit better in your specific way. Stuart Brown says that play personality is not generic. It is really individual. It's as individual as your fingerprint. And it is harder to restore yourself using someone else's version of play. And once you can identify yours, it will be more rejuvenating and restful to you. This is why going to a yoga class doesn't work for everyone. This is why mountain biking doesn't work for everyone. This is why, when somebody says, go join a bowling league, it lands differently for different people. because obviously what lights up one person leaves another person cold and dark. So let's go into some of these play personalities based on, again, Stuart Brown's research. Most people, of course, are a blend of a few of them, but often we have one or two primary types. And as I walk you through them, I want you to listen for the one that you can identify with the most, because that recognition is your nervous system saying, yes, 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 that's me. Okay. So the first one is the Joker. The Joker is drawn to humor, absurdity, silliness, irreverence. They really are restored by laughter, like real deep, unexpected laughter. These are the class clowns. They love making other people laugh. They enjoy life by finding the ridiculous in the seriousness. These are the people that are joking in the break room and keep the whole unit sane. They are performing really a service, and they need space in their off hours where humor doesn't have to be appropriate. They need humor to help lighten their load and help them feel better. So those are the jokers. I think jokers are pretty easy to identify. Okay, the next one he calls I don't even know how to say this, Kinesthete. These are people who are body-based. They live in their body. They are restored by movement, which they do for joy, not necessarily for fitness. Exercise does not feel like a punishment to them. Movement is a delight. I feel like I identify with this. These people dance, they do martial arts, they swim, they do recreational sports. They hike and bike and just are outdoors, and they have no specific training plan attached to it. The body is the play, and the play is the body. And you feel most like yourself when you're physically moving, and most unlike yourself when you've been sedentary for too long. So if this is you, you might be a kinesthete. Okay, the next is the explorer. These are your travelers. The explorer is driven by discovery, novelty. They are restored by going to new places, seeing new ideas, having new experiences, traveling, going to unfamiliar restaurants, or, they have a bucket list of all these places that they want to go and eat at. They follow curiosity down a research rabbit hole at 11 o'clock at night. They enjoy doing things like taking a different route home just to see what's there. The explorer needs freshness and variety. Routine is where they go to die, right? Boredom is their greatest enemy, and novelty is their greatest fuel. And if that's you, you are likely an explorer. Okay, the next is competitor. The competitor is energized by games with clear rules, stakes, and outcomes. They are restored by a challenge, strategy, and they actually do get satisfaction in outperforming other people. This is not necessarily destructive competition, but they really do get aliveness that comes from the game playing itself. So these are our chess players, our tennis people, our board games, the trivia. These people are always rattling off facts and often feel most alive when there's something to win, and inversely feel most flat when everything is the same difficulty. So you might be a competitor if that describes you. Okay, let's talk about the director. The director loves to organize, orchestrate, create experiences for other people. These are our wedding planners, our party planners. They actually do get enjoyment and feel restored by hosting, by planning gatherings. They love bringing people together and watching something that they've designed to come to life. The director is not necessarily trying to control, but because they genuinely love the art of creation through other people. And if you come home hosting a dinner party feeling more energized than when you arrived, and you're just like, yeah, that was so fun, I nailed it, then you could be a director. Okay, the next one is a collector. Shocker, the collector does just that. They love to gather objects, stories, experiences, knowledge, memories. They are restored by the pleasure of the search and the satisfaction of the find. The category matters less than the curation. These things can be vinyl records, hiking, mountains, those national park people that want to go to every single one, or even trying obscure recipes, collecting vintage things. bird species, whatever the collection, the collector is restored by the hunt and the having. If this search is just as satisfying as a finding, then you might be a collector. Just this morning, it cracked me up. I dropped off my daughter at a friend's house, and her son said, "Come look at this." And he is like a Pokemon card fanatic. He has thousands of cards. He was showing all of them to me and how much they were worth. And not only that, but he waits for hours at certain stores when they get resupplied with Pokemon cards, and he buys them and sells them. And it's just been his job. And I loved watching him. He was just lit up talking about all these Pokemon things. And it was really fun to watch. So he is a collector for sure. Okay, the creator. The creator is restored by making things, cooking, right? Cooking a huge complex meal slowly with full attention. These people build furniture, they play music, they write, they compose, they paint, they knit, ceramics, anything, right? And these people, they don't really need to produce something to sell or to share, but just the act of creation itself is the point. And these creative humans feel most like themselves when their hands and their minds are building something from nothing. And often their best hours have been spent creating something. And I love these people. I'm a creator in spurts. So anyway, so those are the types. Now I want you to think about which type you are, or which few types you are, which one resonated, which one made something in you lean forward, which one describes you the best. And you want to use that as the beginning of your play plan. If you remember back to episode 2, if you haven't listened to it, go. Because episode 2, we talked about our play history, creating a map and remembering what we did, the things that we loved before the world told you who you needed to be. So this is where we're identifying even deeper the type of play that we should do. Okay, so now that we know the type of play, then let's create a play plan with your type and with everything that you've learned. Okay, so back to the book, Play It Away. Charlie's approach is to build it 1 week at a time. He said, for sure, don't try and change everything at once, because that is just what high achievers do, is they want to fix and produce and get through it and get to the other side. But he said that too will burn you out. So that's not what we were going to do. So he talks about a 4-week plan. Week 1, write down your anchors and remove 1. Because he says before we can add and play, we need to create that space. So look at your anchor list, find the one stressor that is most draining or the easiest to address, and take 1 step to reduce or remove that anchor this week. And just do it in a little step. Week 2 is schedule 1 protected time where you can play. And use the play personalities to guide you on what to do. And this could be for an hour in the week. If you can't do 1 hour, which I know a lot of you are like, an hour, that's so hard. Start with 5 minutes. Start with, laughing on your way to work. Start with just doing something small and protected in your time, just like you would if you were going to an appointment or had something else on your calendar, and protect it. This is where we really are helping our nervous system feel safe to play and actually doing it. Even if it feels awkward, even if you feel guilty, even if you feel silly, even if you're not sure you're doing it right, this is what we're doing. So the 2nd week, actually schedule it into your calendar. Week 3, and he talks about this a lot. He says what a lot of people are missing is that human connection through play. Stuart Brown's research also confirms that social play, so anything that's shared, joyful activity with other people, is consistently the most restorative form of play. So look for a recreational league. Invite friends to do something playful that isn't, just going out to dinner and to a movie. play board games, play card games, take a class. The connection multiplies the restoration. And this is where we really can feel restored and rested, when we are in the company of other people who are regulated and are also playing. Okay, week 4, make it a non-negotiable. And I love this. He said he stopped watching the news and he doesn't watch the news anymore. I have a person that I love who, the more this person watched the news, the more anxious they got. And it was crazy. It was crazy to watch. So he said the news for him is non-negotiable. So once you've tried several things, review what worked, what helped you feel restored, and protect what you restored. And then he says, and stop treating play as what you do when everything else is finished. He said, because life is never finished and play needs to be scheduled or it will never happen. And just like Arthur Brooks said, we need to be intentional with our play. It's not just not doing something. It is creating that restoration. And I know maybe some of you think this is too hard. It's not. 5 minutes of genuine laughter in the break room. One song that you listen to and dance in your car on the way home from your busy shift. I worked with a nurse who used a funny voice with a patient who needed a laugh. Sending just a funny meme to a friend, whatever. Drawing cartoons in the margin of your notes. Any amount of play that we can work into our day will be beneficial. Okay, so that's all for today. So let's just wrap up. Your challenge this week is to identify your play personality and to schedule purposeful time with your type of play in your calendar. Name and write down some of your stressful anchors that you are going to begin to address with deleting, delegating, rescheduling, changing, and then implement play a little bit more. So if this idea still feels impossible, flat, or pointless to you, I do really want you to remember that this is important information. And we are really talking about your depletion and how you can create a life that is less stressful. So start with any tiny amount that you can. And just remember that you don't have to earn the right to play. You were born with it. And somewhere underneath all the urgency and all the working and all the overachieving and the obligation, a part of you knows how to play, is most likely still there, and it's been waiting. So go find that part. And thank you for listening. Next week is our series finale. And we're just going to talk about integration and what it looks like when work and play stop being at war with each other and you start designing a life where work and play nourish each other and work together. So thank you for being here and take care of yourself. Every week, you're learning something new here on this podcast, and that is a powerful first step. But guess what? Information alone doesn't create transformation. True change happens when you start to think differently and shift the nervous system patterns that drive your behavior. As a coach and an emotional resiliency expert, that is the work I do. I love to walk alongside you, whether it's one-on-one, in a small group that you choose, or with your workplace team. I can help you retrain your brain and nervous system so that stress no longer runs the show.